mid-1970s, Hungary, the country where most of my family is from, was reeling from years of Soviet occupation. The economy was poor, many of the cities were in ruins, and the one thing most people struggled to find were landline telephones. Each time my mother went back to visit, she learned of how difficult it was for people across the country to communicate, and how some people waited as long as 10 years to receive their landlines. This didn't last forever. After years of technological isolation, cellular technology eventually swept across the country, as it had already done in the US and in much of the Western world. Within several years, most people had their own phones, and a once broken society was radically changed for the better. And all it took was the introduction of a piece of technology already available to most of the world. Since the 1970s, the world has changed so much in so few years. Just look at all of the new technology being rolled out each and every day. Autonomous drones, robot companions, human-like AI, even Snapchat filters. These are absolute technological marvels compared to what was possible even as little as 10 years ago. And generally speaking, these things are great. They improve our quality of life and make our jobs as consumers easier. I think most of you could agree that I could spend literally years on Amazon and still be finding new things to buy. So because of these things, it's easy to see how this era in which we are living has already begun to distinguish itself from the previous 50 or 60 years. To you and me, 2017 might just be like any other year. But to the World Economic Forum, this is the beginning of a new revolution, the fourth industrial revolution. Now in history class, we all learned that in the first industrial revolution, the steam engine allowed us to replace human labor in many tasks. In the second, electricity and mass production further improved our productivity. In the mid-20th century, the third industrial revolution brought with it the internet, basic automation, and computerized processing power. Now, in the fourth, we have the opportunity not just to further replace human labor, but human intelligence with that of machines. Now this is an amazing thought. In just a couple of years, I could have machines working right alongside me, aiding me in my daily tasks. So for this reason, I think we can be very excited and very positive about what the future may hold. But today, I want to be a bit of a pessimist, because I want to ask a couple of questions that I think are being raised by this new world in which we are living. Hopefully, these questions will get us thinking about what kind of an economy we might soon have on our hands, as well as what kind of opportunities, as well as responsibilities, we as Andover students will have in the future. So here's the first question. How will the innovations of the near future transform the global economy? And second, probably more crucially, how will individuals in the labor force have to adapt to this new and changing world? Now, I think we can speculate relatively accurately on this first question. If we just look around at what has already happened, we can begin to derive some of the economic trends of the future. But before we do this, I want to make a quick analogy, and I want to do it using a little bit of physics. So one of the most fundamental laws of the universe states that the average entropy is constantly increasing. Essentially, we're always wasting energy in the form of friction or heat, and there's not much we can really do about that. However, if you think about it, the purpose of technology throughout history has generally been to push us in the opposite direction. It makes our lives more frictionless and more efficient. This idea was first introduced to me by a post on a Hungarian website called Fundblog, and it promises that the global economy will only continue to grow more rapidly. Because in the same way that we experience less friction in our lives, it also means that businesses experience less friction or overhead, which saves them lots of money in the long run. Consumers, too, also feel the benefit. I can have any item at my doorstep in a day, or pay for a fridge with just the swipe of my phone. So because of these things, I think we can be very confident in saying that businesses will have the opportunity to succeed in the future. And we know that consumers are already benefiting. So this just leaves employees. Where are they left in this picture? Well, the effect that the new industrial revolution has already had on employees may not be exactly what you expect. Surprisingly, the demand for labor in the US hasn't decreased, while the proportion of working adults continues to rise at a very steady rate. There's actually a really great TED Talk by a man named David Otter, a professor of economics at MIT, in which he explains this phenomenon in greater detail. Essentially, although it is true that jobs that are repetitive or easily programmable have already begun to be replaced by machines, because of the lower costs, businesses can expand more easily, and therefore there's a steady supply of new jobs. The real problem does not lie in how many jobs we have, but what kind of jobs they are. Many new jobs today either require a ton of specialized education or very little at all. There is a polarization in the job market. This is bad because disparities between the super rich and the super poor may grow worse, and women across the globe have already suffered disproportionately. In addition, we're seeing college graduates leaving after graduation unable to find employment. Apart from all of this, technology is really yet to have the expected positive impact on the economy. Global GDP growth, essentially the amount of stuff we make per year, has slowed, in large part due to stagnation in productivity, and no one is really sure why. So here's the big question. How do we solve all of these problems? During previous periods of economic transition, the world has always seemed to right itself. VHS became Blu-ray, Blockbuster became Netflix, people moved to different industries, and the labor pool adapted adequately. But we can't take this for granted. Things don't just happen. I believe that the first steps will lie in the way we educate ourselves. Because the bottom line is that the people who will succeed the best in the future are those people who can capitalize on what technology cannot do. Creativity, empathy, problem-solving skills, having the ability to ask the proper question in the proper way. These are innately human skills, and thankfully, they're already things that we are being taught here at Andover, meaning we are uniquely positioned to be prepared for what the future may hold. Now, at the end of the day, my talk today wasn't meant to add stress to your lives, although it was a bit of a warning. All I really ask of you is that you turn a critical eye to the trends that are emerging around you, to be aware that the world is changing, and it's changing fast. Not everyone has the privilege of an Andover education. Therefore, we must ensure that what we learn during our time here is put to good use. Our schooling will allow us to face the challenges of the future head-on, because ultimately, I believe that our generation has been tasked with navigating the trials of this new world. During previous industrial revolutions, entire swaths of the planet were left in the dark, isolated and frozen, much the same way that Hungary was. So now, if we choose to be aware that the world is changing, and we choose to say that yes, we are willing to solve the problems that we are already beginning to identify, then we must not allow this to happen again. Instead, we must ask ourselves how best we can aid in the global transition towards what could be an unprecedented era of global connectedness and prosperity. And we must do so in such a way that as we move forward, we do not leave a single person or country far behind. Thank you.